There's been a long public debate in Tynwald this week about the future of public service broadcasting, and while members agree that Manx Radio is the so-called voice of the nation and should be supported, government funding in the future cannot be guaranteed. Now I'm with Richard Ronan, MHK, and you chaired the select committee that looked at the future of Manx Radio really specifically. And the main recommendation was to continue to fund the station to the tune of at least £850,000 a year. And members didn't agree with that, did they?
I wouldn't say it was the main recommendation. It was part of the recommendations we put forward, which were 12. It was obviously important. We felt that from the advice we received, that the funding should be for the term of the licence. Obviously, given the Isle of Man's budgetary problems, they felt that was unacceptable. At the end of the day, this was coming on the back of expert advice, which was from John Myers and other people we'd spoken to. The end of the day, it's not the end of the world. What matters is that Manx Radio now has a bit more surety, certainly with the Council of Europe recommendations, the statutory footing, and something which I was very keen to see put in, which was the further and better engagement with the BBC. Yeah,
we have this this problem here, don't we, where we either have a public service broadcaster over here serving us, whether that's the BBC or Manx Radio, or we have commercial operations. How can Manx Radio be publicly funded and compete with the commercial radio stations?
Yeah, I think this is a good point. I think 2002, the Durham report that went through Tynwald sort of highlighted this. Was that that Manx Radio should have more separation from commercial radio stations. As I said in Tynwald, I don't believe that's really happened, which is a real shame, because what we have is 3 radio stations basically competing against each other, where a public service broadcaster really is a public service broadcaster. The content in that shouldn't really be competing, which is our commercial radio stations, which is Energy and Free FM. I would like to think that the report that we put forward and the recommendations that have been approved will again give a bit more clarity, not just to Manx Radio, and something which the committee were very keen to see, which was more clearer direction for the commercial radio stations, certainly regarding their market and Manx Radio's market.
Now, one of the recommendations that was approved was the BBC input, I think the late night service. Is that something that you'd like to see expanded?
Very much so. I think it's always been a bone of contention, hasn't it? We pay £4.5 million every year to the BBC for a service which is excellent. Let's face it. We get all the BBC services, except an independent, a radio station. Which, if we look at the nearest jurisdictions towards us, similar, which is Jersey and Guernsey, they choose not to have their own independent public service broadcaster. They choose to have the BBC, and that's included in their licence fee. The Isle of Man, I don't think people realise this, could have the same, but we choose to have our own. Now, BBC, I've said, rightly or wrongly, that's your choice, and this has always been the choice for 50 years. The Isle of Man chooses to have its own, and that comes at a cost, which, taking all things into account, that was £850,000, but there's also the ongoing capital cost. It's arguably over £1 million a year, but it's called our national treasure. We seem to want it, and all the reports we're getting back, it is successful. But as I say, that comes at a cost, and what the report was trying to do was to put the radio station on a clearer, better footing, which I think it has done.
Now, there was some criticism in Tynwald. The Chief Minister, for example, complained about the arrogance of senior management, and there's a recommendation for cuts there. How will that be tackled?
Well, that has to be tackled internally. They've already accepted the report. It did highlight this. It was the Myers report again, which said that the management is top heavy. I would like to hope now that this will be taken at board level, that they'll come back with their recommendations, and we wait and see what they'll do with it.
There was talk at one point, I think I'm correct in saying, about actually publishing the salaries of the top management layer at Manx Radio. Is that something that might happen?
It may do. I think, you know, as a committee we had a brief to work on, which we did. That is something which maybe Treasury could look into. I don't see it doing any harm personally. You know, what is there to hide? So again, we'll wait and see.
And generally, how do you feel about the outcome of the debate? During it, you said that you didn't think the recommendations should be cherry-picked. Well, they were.
I had to try, Jo, didn't I?
but generally, are you happy enough with the way that went?
As I described it, I think 8 out of 10. I think I said that I was concerned that if we started pulling some of the recommendations and diluting them too much, I described it like a game of Kaplunk, and I think if we meddle with it too much, the report might just collapse in time. I don't think that's going to happen. I understand the Chief Minister's and Treasury Minister's concerns about funding. I think what's important now is that Manx Radio are allowed to get on with their job. I'm hoping that the direction of Manx Radio will improve. Not just for the for the staff and off Manx Radio, but for the public of the Isle of Man in general.